Imagine a foreign army coming to your neighborhood and demanding that you either convert to another religion or leave your city or be killed. How would your life change? We'll talk about that situation tonight, so please stay with us. Thank you. Thank you very much. And welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa, and welcome to EWTN Live, where we bring you guests from all over the world. And tonight we have a guest who will speak about far away, but he's not from too great a distance as California. He spends his days ministering to Chaldean Christians in this country who have come from Iraq and other places in the Middle East in order to escape persecution and war. He is a Chaldean Catholic priest and the rector of the Chaldean Seminary of Mar Abba the Great in San Diego, California. So please welcome Father Simon Esshaki. Father Simon.
Thank you for having me.
Well, now you were not born in Iraq.
I was not. No, I am a first-generation American-born Chaldean.
Okay,
Yeah.
But the community where you live in El Cajon area of San Diego County has lots of Chaldean Christians.
Lots of Chaldeans.
And they've come, some of them have come very recently with the most recent trouble. Some have been here for even a generation or two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Your dad was born over in Iraq, correct?
Yeah, so my mom and dad were born in Baghdad, and they immigrated here to America in the 1970s.
Okay.
So they were some of the people that came here early on. A lot of Chaldeans actually came here much earlier than that, but my parents came here in the 70s, and like you said, a lot of people since that time have been coming to America to flee the persecution that's been going on back in Iraq.
It wasn't so, the Chaldeans were not so persecuted in the 70s
Not so
as they
persecuted,
are
yeah.
now.
No, not even close.
Or as they were in earlier parts of the 20th century.
That's right. That's right.
They and earlier centuries. It's been a difficult life for the Christians of the Chaldean Rite. When did they first become Christian?
So the Chaldean Christians are some of the oldest Christians.
Yes.
One of the most ancient Christian communities to exist.
Yes.
After Jesus rose from the dead and right before he ascended into heaven, he told his apostles, go into the whole world and baptize all nations. Now, they were in the Roman Empire, and the other major empire next to them was the Parthian Empire of the Persians, where Mesopotamia was, and that's where the Chaldeans, Assyrians, the Babylonian people were. And so after Jesus went up to heaven, the apostles all went out into their missions to evangelize the world. And actually Thomas, the apostle, along with Ed Day, who's St. Jude Thaddeus, most likely he was one of the 12, and also St. Mari, went with St. Thomas to the region of Mesopotamia and evangelized the Mesopotamian people there, among whom were the Chaldean people. So basically, right after Jesus went up to heaven, that's when our people started being evangelized in that region.
And St. Thomas continued going south. He would
Yes.
eventually all the way to India.
That's right.
Where there were a number of Jewish communities that spoke Aramaic that he wanted to evangelize, but he left St. Mary and St. Adai
there.
Behind, and they continued to lead the community.
Yeah, that's why actually the Chaldean liturgy uses the Eucharistic prayer of St. Adai and Mari. So it goes all the way back to those apostolic times.
Yeah, and it's the oldest Eucharistic prayer that is known to us.
Yeah.
It's earlier than the Greek or the Latin, certainly the Latin. That's 3rd century.
Yeah.
So this is nothing compared to y'all. This is your 1st century.
Yeah.
Now, in these early days, the Christians experienced persecution from the early centuries. Is that not correct?
Yes, that is true. And we know that from the biblical times, from where Christianity started in Jerusalem, from when St. Paul, when Saul would persecute all the Christians. And it did happen in our region also. There are many stories about many Chaldean saints who were martyred from the earliest times. And so it has actually gotten our church to be called the Church of the Martyrs. So this persecution that's happening now is really not something new. It has been happening since that time. There's actually even a story, the first patriarch who was martyred was in the 4th century. His name is Mar Shimon Bar Sabai. And what happened was they were living in the Persian Empire, and the Persians...
Just so folks understand, too, the Persians and the Romans went back and forth for centuries as to who would rule Mesopotamia. It was back in the hands of the Persians at this time.
Yes. So it was back in the hands of the Persians at this time, and there was already tensions in the Roman Empire between the Christians and the Romans. And so there were also tensions in the Persian Empire between the Christians and the Persians. The main Christians of the Persian Empire were the ones of the Chaldean Catholic Church of the East. It was just called the Church of the East at the time. So what happened was the Persian Emperor Shapur II commanded that the Patriarch Mar Shimon Bar Sabai would take an insane amount of taxes from the Christian people for the Persian government. And he refused for multiple reasons, obviously, but one of the reasons why he refused was because the people, they were very poor people, and they could not handle something like that. And another one was that he realized, and all the people realized, that they were human beings too, and they deserved dignity as human beings and not to be second-class citizens. And that's a lot of what we're seeing happening now. So he refused that. And it made the empire very upset, and the empire tried to force him and multiple bishops and multiple priests to convert and to become Zoroastrian, which is what the Persians were at the time, fire-worshipping pagans. They refused, and so Mar Shimon Bar Sabai watched about 100 people, including priests and bishops, were beheaded before he was finally beheaded. And so that's just one of the stories that shows from the first centuries of Christianity how the Chaldean church was persecuted and how we have martyrs in our church.
A second great phase of persecution came after the Muslim invasions. Now, so the folks understand, as you said, your folks are Chaldean. There are the descendants of the Assyrians and a few Medes. The people that we see in the Bible, their descendants are still in the region.
That's right.
And Arabs came from the Arabian Peninsula. There are different people with a different language, correct?
Yes.
And so they, when they came with Islam, then new waves of persecutions started in the region as well.
Yeah, so it was then when Islam first came into power, and so then it became much like it is now, not just a persecution by the state, but a religious persecution, which we saw happening. You know, there were different waves of the persecution.
The Abbasids were really rough. You know, they were. The Umayyads were not so bad, but the Abbasids were very bad.
That's right. So these people, they were forced to, they were pushed, I should say, to convert to Islam and, you know, to the other religions, the other religious groups that would persecute them. They were pushed to, they would not convert, and most of the time they would be killed. Yeah.
And even if there was an easing of the persecution, the Christians and the Jews were called dhimmi. They second-class citizens who didn't have the right to live like everybody else.
That's right.
They couldn't even ride horses. You know, they couldn't build buildings higher than a Muslim's building, and so on.
Yeah.
So there are lots of these rules that, you know, when there was peace, it still was second-class citizenship at best.
That's right. Yeah. So for the majority of our church's history, we have been being persecuted, whether it's being physically killed or, like you said, being second-class citizens in the region that we were because of religious reasons, ultimately, because of people's disagreement with Christianity.
Right. You know, it's in the Quran, for instance, there's a denial that Jesus was crucified in Surah 4, verse 157. So if we believe that he was crucified and rose, and they changed that and reject it, said no, he wasn't, that's a major conflict. You know, in their mind.
And so then we become the heretics, which is what they call it, and so they persecute anybody who does not fully believe in what they believe in.
Right. Yeah. The reason that is relevant for today is it's back.
Yeah.
Wasn't the case in the time, as bad as he was, Saddam Hussein did not persecute the Christians.
Yeah. He
did so the Assyrians, but not the Chaldeans.
Yeah, really for Saddam Hussein, it was not a religious persecution ever for him. He was a brutal dictator who wanted power, and so he would persecute everybody. Yeah. Everybody who would not agree with him, whether you were Christian, Muslim, anything, he would persecute. So it really wasn't a Christian persecution at the time, but it was a brutal dictatorship, like I said. And so, for example, we talked about my parents coming here in the 70s. My grandfather worked in the government, and he refused to join Saddam's Ba'ath Party. And he refused to join, and so he could see the pressure from the government for him to join, and, you know, asking him why he wouldn't. And he could also foresee, as a lot of people could, that if Saddam would fall, there would be chaos in the region. And so I remember actually very vividly when I was watching on the news when I was younger, when Saddam had actually fell, and my grandpa we were in America obviously, and my grandpa was very sad and upset, and I really wondered. I said, isn't this good for the region that a brutal dictator has been taken down? And he said, no, not really, because when a brutal dictator is taken down, there are all of these revolutionary groups who have been waiting to have power, and so then they will take the power. And so you have all these groups, and now we are seeing the fruit of that. We are seeing now the chaos, unfortunately, in that region.
So, and that's one of the things that it's hard for us to perceive sometimes in America, because they use all these other names to themselves in Arabic, and we don't understand. But, you know, Shia folks led by a Sadr, and then other folks who were Sunni that were led by factions of Al Qaeda, now ISIS, and a variety of other nationalistic groups. There's just, it was chaos.
So
we
many of
saw
them, yeah.
that killing going on after we had invaded.
Yeah. So now, unfortunately, because of that chaos, we have all of these groups who are targeting each other, and unfortunately, even early on in the 2000s, before ISIS came into power, you had all of these Muslim groups at war with each other, and unfortunately, the Christians became the victims. They were the small minority who didn't have to do with anything, but they became the victims of that.
For the most part, the Christians didn't take sides with any groups. They, again, it's the tradition as second-class citizens. They weren't allowed to be armed, were they?
That's right. No. So they did not take sides because if they took a side, the other side would be really hostile toward them, and because, like you said, they were not armed. So, and the people for whom which they would take a side would not really defend them very much.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it was. So
Right.
they really did not take sides, and so they have been, they were majorly persecuted even before ISIS came into power, even before what's happening now.
But
in the
then
region.
when ISIS did come, it was amazing. At one point, it was just a few hundred trucks, pickup trucks with machine guns on it.
Yeah.
That's all that they
Yeah.
were coming out of Syria.
Yeah.
And they made the Iraqi army run.
Yeah.
And they took over Mosul, which is a major Christian center
Yeah.
for centuries.
Yeah, Mosul is actually formerly called Nineveh,
Right.
And it's the city that we all know, the biblical city. So, and actually in Mosul, like I said, even before ISIS, there was persecution. In Mosul in 2007, a Chaldean priest named Father Raghid Genni, who was a very, very faithful priest, he was, his life had been threatened by the extremists there. He was walking out of the church with 3 of his subdeacons, and they were approached. They were approached by some extremists, and they were asked to convert to Islam, and they strongly refused. All 4 of them, including the priest, were all shot and killed in the street. And their bodies were actually left in the street because people were so scared, and so they were left in the street for hours. That was in the city of Mosul a few years before ISIS even came in. The following year, in 2008, that priest's bishop, the bishop of the Chaldean diocese of Mosul, Bishop Polis Faradrahu, a great man who I actually met just a few months before he was kidnapped by the extremists, and they kept him for 2 weeks until, unfortunately, the people found his body and he was dead. So this was all in the city of Mosul before ISIS came in. So Christians have been persecuted. The faithful of the Chaldean church have been persecuted.
But when ISIS did
yeah.
come into the city with this military force and drove out the Iraqi army and took their weapons,
That's
they left
right.
them behind, they began a systematic persecution of all the Christians in the town.
Yeah, so they went into Mosul in August of 2014. They arrived in the city, and around that time also in the villages in the Nineveh plain, all of the villages where the Chaldean and Assyrian people were born and raised and lived in. They went into the villages and so brutally went to all the Christians, and they gave them the options that you mentioned earlier in the show. they must either convert or pay a tax, a very, very big tax, the jizya tax in the Sharia law, or they must leave, or they'll be killed. They will be beheaded.
Right.
And so these Christians, none of them converted. None of them. They left everything. All of them. They left.
They didn't let them take stuff with them.
They left with just the clothes on their backs.
Right.
Just the clothes. They left all of their belongings, all of their possessions that they have had for years, that they had cherished all their lives. They had to leave them with their families. And so they left Mosul. 120,000 Christians left their homes at the time. 120,000, maybe even more than that. But about 120,000 left their homes and they went to Kurdistan, to the capital of Kurdistan.
Which is over to the east.
Yeah, which is in the east.
East of Mosul.
Yeah. So they went into Kurdistan, to the capital of Kurdistan, Erbil, where there's a Chaldean diocese. There's a Chaldean bishop there. And so they went there and they had nowhere to go, all these people, so they went to the churches. And the Chaldean bishop there, Bishop Bashar Warda, describes how all of the churches were completely full that day. How just people came and they were packed in all of the churches. And so the community there in Erbil started programs where they would help these people. All the bishops met, the patriarchs met too, including the Chaldean patriarch, Mar Luis Rafael Sacco. They met and they tried to find a plan to how to help these people who had left their homes, who had left everything, and who were in the city of Erbil in Kurdistan with no family that they knew there most of the time. And they just had to find a way to help these people.
Yeah, and I remember seeing, we had a show on this few years ago when this happened. People were staying in buildings that were partly completed. They were just in open air, no walls.
Yeah.
Staying in tents, in containers, like ship containers they use for transportation. They were in there. They were in tents. And it was it just had nothing, no water, no sewage, no food.
Yeah, so at the time, it was just such a major shock because you had this city and these few churches who have never handled something like that, who have only handled their few parishioners that attended their parish, but have never had to give basic humanitarian needs to their people,
on a large
much
scale.
less 120,000 people, that they have to help them to survive. And so that's what they did. Like you mentioned, God bless the churches in Iraq and northern Iraq and in Erbil, who went around and who rented houses, and they made tents, and they provided people with water, with food, and with shelter. And even now, as the time went on with education, who have really made these people feel at home as best as they can, even though they're not at home, even though their hearts are still back in those villages where their homes were, where their belongings were, where their lives were. Yeah.
This is something that is another kind of crisis too, because as we hear in the news in bits and pieces, it's not real big, but Mosul is being retaken block by block.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult fighting. So folks understand, the ISIS fighters, all day long, they wear bomb across their chest. If you shoot them or capture them, they blow themselves up. And people are afraid to capture them because you'll die if you do.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult fighting that Kurdish and Iraqi and some Christian now they have their own militia.
Some Christian militias
learned how to defend themselves in this crisis. So they're trying to take it back, but there's a crisis as to will they go back to Mosul
Yeah.
for what?
So-
This is, their houses are
yeah.
gone, right?
Yeah. So, like you mentioned, Father, in December actually is when the major effort was taking place of when the Kurdish and the Iraqi forces went into Mosul, and they started with the neighboring villages in the
Right.
Nineveh plain, and they freed some of the villages. Now they are working piece by piece, like you said, into Mosul. Mosul is 1.5 million people city. It's a
Big town.
big town.
Second
it's the
biggest in
second
Iraq.
largest in
Yeah.
Iraq. Only Baghdad is bigger. So it's a monumental project, because if they take Mosul back, they will basically defeat ISIS, because that's where their major stronghold is there in
Right.
Iraq. So they went to go and free these villages and to free these people's homes. But these people know, and they found out, that most of their homes have been destroyed. There's nothing to go back to. The homes have been destroyed, and first, before the homes were actually destroyed, the churches were destroyed.
Yep.
And the churches were desecrated. ISIS would take down the crosses from the churches and would put their flags. They would use the Catholic churches as their strongholds to get ready for battle. So these people miss their homes, but unfortunately, they just can't go back right now, because their homes are not ready. They were destroyed, and because of the security of the region, they just got their villages back. But not all the villages are free, and not all of Mosul is free. So, they will live in constant fear.
And sometimes the Western politicians have said, well, we don't want these refugees to come to the West, to America or to Europe, because we don't want to see their community disappear in the Middle East. But, so what about them needing help?
Yeah.
That
Needing
this
to-
is a crisis
to
for them.
survive.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it is a very good point that, this is a major worry of ours, that for the first time in 2,000 years, the oldest Christian community will be gone from that region. And it's very, very sad that throughout all the persecution of our whole church, all of these centuries of great, great persecution, now is the time where it's really looking hopeless right now.
Yeah.
It is really looking hopeless, and it is very sad. But with Christ, there's always hope. So we have hope that these villages will be freed, and that the people can go back to their villages in peace one day. But
Right.
at the moment,
This
it's
is not
really
today.
not looking like it. And so a lot of people, like you said, are actually leaving and are actually trying to get out of there. But a lot of people do want to stay. They have that dream to return to their homes and to return to how their lives used to be. Whether that's going to happen or not, we'll have to wait and see.
And when you think that the Assyrians and the Babylonians have been there since 2500 BC,
Yeah.
they're 4,500 years.
Yeah.
We have to take a break because we don't have that long. And so we have to take a break now, but we'll be back in just a minute with your questions about this situation and some of our response. So please stay with us. Thank you. Well, first of all, we'd like to invite you to come here and join us. We have a wonderful group of folks, mostly from New Jersey, a few other places too, Maryland and a couple other places. And we would love to have you come and join us as well. Have you had a good time today? Yeah, see? And yesterday they got to go up to the shrine of the Most Blessed Sacrament and visit that. That was good too, right? So this is, we'd love to have you contact our pilgrimage department. And their phone number is 205-271-2966, or you can go to our website, EWTN.com, and they will give you information about the schedule of the masses, of programs where you can be in the audience like these nice folks. You can also, they'll give you directions to get up to Hansville and places to stay and good places to eat. So we'd love to have you come here and join us. Father, are you ready for some questions?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's start off with this young lady here. Ma'am, where are you from?
Virginia.
Good to have you here. Welcome.
Thank
Did you join up with these folks? Or just happened to
here.
come here? Just
came.
good to have you. And so your question?
The question is, what's so disturbing is not only the killing of the Christians, but leveling the churches and leveling their homes. You mentioned earlier prior persecutions. Did those earlier persecutions also damage the churches and the living quarters of everyone?
Great question.
Yes, they have been doing that. And really, this is not something, like I said, that started with ISIS. This is, it is a Muslim extremist that, like we mentioned, that hates the non-believers. It's that Muslim extremism that wants to kill and to destroy the people that don't believe in them. So there's actually a story in 2010 when the Syriac Catholic Church, they were having mass in Baghdad, and extremists came into the church and they held them hostage for hours before killing about 60 people in the church, including 2 young priests. They were killed. So this is really not something, like I said, that started now. It's something that has been going on, this persecution through death and with, destroying and desecrating the churches of the region.
Now, and I don't think it was quite so. It was probably sporadic during the times of the Ottoman Turkish Empire. But it wasn't this intensity that we see now until 1915 to 17.
Yeah.
Then the Ottoman Turks did a horrible persecution of the Armenians and anybody else, the Syriac.
Among whom were Syriacs, Assyrians, Chaldeans, who were killed.
Right, and so they were sporadic, but with the Turks, it was also interesting that persecution was more based on nationalism than it was religious persecution. It was a nationalistic reaction to get non-Turks out of the empire. But now, under ISIS, it is specifically religious.
Yes.
And this is stuff that's trying to understand. Let's take a call. We have Kim calling. Hello, Kim.
Hello.
Hi, where are you calling from?
Illinois.
What part?
Central Illinois.
Central Illinois. See, I'm originally from Illinois, but not there. That's nice people. Not my neighborhood. So, Kim, what is your question?
Okay, I had a couple questions. My first question is, how does one help the Christians that are wanting to go back to Mosul? And then my second question is, how, if they do go back, since they've been persecuted prior to ISIS, are they afraid to go back because it doesn't seem like the government of Iraq is helping them, as in Syria, Assad, it seems like, at least tries to help the Christians, and in Iraq, you don't see that.
Kim, very observant on your part.
Sure.
It is true that in Syria, before all of this was going on, Christians were much protected, very well protected in Syria. All the different Christian sects were equally and fully protected. But when ISIS came in and some of the other terrorists, then it became very violent. I mean, they were crucifying Christians all over Syria, because they hate the cross, and so they would crucify Christians as extra punishment. Are the Christians afraid to go back to Mosul?
Yes, they are very much afraid. Like I said, mainly because Mosul is not fully, is still in ISIS control at some parts, and mainly it is, just parts of it have been freed. So until Mosul is completely released of ISIS control and all the northern villages, and there is some security in the region, because now if they go there, I mean, who knows when ISIS is going to come back? They could come at any time. So the point is that these people are very fearful of going back, and so now they're staying in Erbil, in the capital of Kurdistan. But it's really not a good living situation for those people. They are.
It's not something where they can establish.
Not at all.
Businesses, making a living, and so on.
Some of them.
They don't own any land.
Yeah, even just the basic living circumstances for them. I mean, at the beginning, some of them, there were 20 people sleeping in one room, and this happened not because the church didn't have places to put these people, but because of the amount of people that came into the region that have been, that were kicked out of their homes and had nowhere to live. And so now in the region, in Erbil, there is still those, some 120,000 people there waiting to go back. And the diocese, the Chaldean diocese in Erbil actually is supported not by any government agency. They are supported by pure donations of Catholic organizations, Catholic people. And so I actually spoke with the bishop of the Erbil, the Chaldean Catholic bishop, Bashar Warda, who actually told me that they only have funds left for 2 months left now to support all these people, and they need an immense amount of money there.
The government of Iraq does
not give, no.
The government of Kurdistan does.
Not that I know of. Not that I know of.
They protect them.
Yeah.
They've done that.
They protect them, yes.
But they're not a wealthy government either.
No. There are major economic problems in there. I mean, government employees only get 25% of their salary. The
government can't afford to pay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We have a question from our studio audience. Sir, where are you from?
I'm from Alabama.
Great, good to have you here. And what is your question?
My question, sort of a follow-up with Kim, is are there any Christian organizations that are focused on helping Christians, Chaldean Christians, say, go back to Mosul or areas where they lived and be able to be back in their home? And if that's not possible, what are some practical things that we can do here in America to support? I mean, there's going to be a lot of Christians in Mosul that are going to be left without a home. What can we do to help them?
Very good question. So, like I mentioned, how the bishop in Erbil is relying on donations from faithful. These donations are coming through organizations to him. So there's a couple major organizations that have been doing this. There's one called Aid to the Church in Need.
Yes.
That is really doing a lot for those people, and so you can donate to that organization. There are also the 2 Chaldean dioceses in America have programs that are meant to help these people. The diocese that I'm a part of in San Diego is working through the Knights of Columbus, who are doing a great amount of work for these people, in generating donations and in helping them live their lives. And also the diocese, the Chaldean diocese in Michigan, has an organization. You can go online to actually helpiraq.com.
Yes.
Helpiraq.com, and you can donate there. One of the things that they're doing, one of the new projects that they have, is to help them receive their basic medical needs. So they are establishing clinics where they have actually volunteer doctors coming and working for these people to give them the most basic medical needs that they need for those thousands of people that are there.
Yeah, because again, some of them are doctors.
Yeah,
they're professionals,
right.
but they couldn't bring an aspirin with them.
Yeah,
when they left Mosul.
Exactly.
So they, yet alone their instruments and tools of the trade.
Yeah.
So that's a very great need.
Yeah, it is a great need, and like we were talking about earlier, about the Christians still being persecuted outside of the region, not just by ISIS. I mean, it is a fact that Christians are not the only minority being persecuted.
That's right.
There
That's
are
right.
the Yazidis are being majorly persecuted. Even some Muslims are being persecuted.
Yeah, so if a group is a minority Muslim group, for instance, in a Sunni area, Shiite
Yes, will be
Muslims
persecuted.
are persecuted, while in a Shia area, Sunni can be
that's right.
persecuted, plus other little sects like the Awali and the Ismaili, and all these other little
right.
groups
That's
that
right.
exist.
So even if a Christian can, get the proper funds to, go and live their lives again, it will still be very hard for them because they are still seen as second class. So, for example, there's a story. Through these organizations, there was a man who was living in the tents and the homes that the church made in Erbil, and he needed surgery of some kind. And so the organizations generated funds for him to have that surgery. He found a doctor who was Muslim who actually rejected him because he was Christian, who would not treat him.
Yeah.
So this is a major crisis that you have these Christians who are living in the region who day by day are becoming a smaller and smaller minority to live their lives there and to live their lives like a normal human being would, and that's a great challenge for these people.
And I think it's good to know when I know a number of Chaldeans, just like I've known Palestinian Christians and Christians from Syria and Christians from Lebanon. It was normal that Muslim and Christian neighbors just were neighbors to each other.
That's right.
It was when this ideology was brought in by Al-Qaeda and by ISIS, or Daesh as it's called in Arabic, this new ideology of radicalism, destroyed any sense of neighbors who once just got along fine.
That's right. And even now, with what's happening in Mosul and in the villages, even though the villages had a lot of Christian people, obviously there were still Muslims, So what happened was, for these people that left their homes, they were told, and there are stories of this happening, they were told by their Muslim neighbors that they would protect their homes and that they would be a defense for these people, but really a lot of their neighbors betrayed them.
Exactly.
And so it was very, very sad for these people to know that these people who they thought were their friends actually betrayed them. And so that's what happened when we saw the Arabic letter Nun, the N, being written on their houses to call them Nazarene. They're followers of Jesus of Nazareth. And so the ISIS militants did that to distinguish these homes as Christian homes. And so how did they get that information? Is they, asked all the neighbors, and they wrote that on the homes, and then they would destroy the homes and, take all the belongings in there.
And, and by the way, so folks understand, we're not called by that word, Nasrin.
Yeah.
No, that's not the word for
That's
Christian.
Right. Yeah.
Christians are Messiahim. That's the literal translation of Christian.
Yeah.
It's from the word Messiah,
followers of Christ,
which is Christ.
Yeah.
And so Messiahim, but that's the same letter that Muslim begins with. So they changed to Nun for Nasrin instead of Messiahim. So it was also just a little added insult.
Yeah.
Let's now go over to John. Hello, John.
Hello, Father Mitch.
Hi, what's your question tonight?
Father Simon, I will be praying for you and everybody.
Thank you.
What happens if there is a Chaldean Catholic in the church community and they get killed by extremists? What do the priest and the community do, if anything? And is that person considered a martyr? And I'll hang up.
Thank you, John. So first, are these people being killed considered martyrs?
Yes, they are considered martyrs because they had the chance to save their lives when they were told to leave their villages or to convert. And if they convert, then they are, fully along with the ISIS ideology and with everything. So they rejected that because of their faith. And so this is a very good question, because we can see the faith that these people have, that these people really have true faith in Jesus, and that they combat this violence with love and with their faith.
I've seen people interview Chaldean Christians in Erbil who were interviewed, and they were praying for the Muslims that persecuted them.
That's right.
They were praying for. That is exactly what Jesus Christ told us to do.
Yeah.
And it's easy for us relatively easy for us to pray for those persecutors. For them, when they pray for the persecutors who sometimes killed or raped their relatives, this is something that's even much, much more serious.
Yeah, that really takes an act of faith. And like you said, Jesus told us to do that, and Jesus did it himself on the cross. Yes. And so from the earliest on in the church, they would do that, and I mean, imagine like if Saint Stephen, the first Christian martyr, he prayed for his persecutors,
right,
among whom were Saul, who was there. Imagine if he hadn't prayed for Saul, what would have happened? You know, I mean, so this is something that these people are showing their love for Christ in their faith, and so I mean, hopefully something good can come out of this.
Yeah, this is something that it's good to remember that eventually Paul and Stephen met together as martyrs in heaven. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I have another caller. Hello, Marie.
Yes, Father Mitch. First of all, thank you for such great programs. I absolutely love EWTN.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that.
But what I want to say is, first of all, my heart goes out to all the Christians that are being persecuted. And but I wanted to know, before all this trouble started in Iraq and all the wars in Syria, Egypt, all over the place, did the Christians and Muslims get along prior to all this here stuff? Were they protected by the dictators of Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan and whatever?
Sure. Thank you.
Sure.
That's a good question.
Yeah, so like we were talking about earlier, the persecutions that happened, earlier in the 20th century were generally not religious persecutions, like we talked about.
Yeah, they were nationalistic.
They were nationalistic. So even in the time of Saddam Hussein, like we said, he did not really target Christians. So Christians and Muslims really did get along for a period of time. And let's not forget that Christians and Muslims do get along now. There are a lot of Muslims who are good-hearted people. Yeah. But there is that small group of extremists who do not get along with Christians and who want them
or
dead.
other Muslims.
Or other Muslims also. Yeah, that's right.
I don't like them either.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that question. Now, just one last thing before we go tonight. In the last few minutes, you're the rector of a seminary. So young. I mean, I remember when rectors were old, but then baseball players used to be old to me, and cops used to be old. Now they're all kids. So at any rate, maybe I'm old now. But at any rate, so you're the rector. This is a seminary for Chaldean young men who are moving toward the priesthood.
That's right. And so one of the reasons why I, who am so young, am the rector is because there's a lack of priests in our church. There is a lack of vocations in our church, much like there is in the Latin Rite Church also. But that doesn't stop the younger generation from, hearing the call of God. We have 6 seminarians in our diocese, and in the diocese of the eastern United States and Michigan, I'm not exactly sure, but I think they have over 10 seminarians now. Young American-born people. So the future of our church is definitely bright. It's definitely bright. And it's based on the faith of our people and the faith of our people who have lived through this persecution. And we actually look at their faith as an example. And we look at their faith and we see how valuable it is, what they're dying for, what they're dying for, and what we should also be living for. And so we have revered the martyrs of our church since the beginning. Actually, in our daily evening prayers in our office, there's a section for hymns about the martyrs that have been written in our church.
I think it's very important for all of us Catholics to ask the intercession of these contemporary martyrs. These martyrs in Iraq, in Syria, in other countries, and Africa. There are many martyrs also being killed in Africa by terrorists who are related to the same ideology of Islam. And we need to seek their intercession for our own faith. To be stronger, and to pray for the conversion of the persecutors, that there are more St. Pauls in ISIS and Boko Haram and Hezbollah and Hamas. That this, to pray for their conversion and to love them.
And it's really, something we can and should do is look to these people, like I said, as an example for how we should live our faith. If we're going to miss Mass on Sunday because of laziness, what is that saying about our faith when these people are dying for the Eucharist? They are risking their lives literally every time they go to Mass.
My bed is too soft. I don't want to get out. Stop that whine. I'll give you something to whine about.
And also now, in these times, you can see the Chaldean churches there are absolutely packed every Sunday and during all the feasts.
So in the face of martyrdom, they come out more strongly. This is a model, and all the whining that goes on in this country about all kinds of things. There's no room for that from us Christians. We Christians have no basis for that. One thing, though, that we do have to deal with is reality. We're out of time. Will you join me in giving a blessing to our audience and asking the intercession of the Chaldean martyrs and all the Christians of the Assyrian Orthodox and other communities? By their intercession, may God bless you and keep you, and may God strengthen us as these martyrs are strong. God bless you, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. And again, we can bring Father Esshaki and all the other guests that we have only because this network is brought to you by you. You make it possible as you keep us in between your gas bill, your electric bill, and cable bill. Remember just a year ago this week that Mother died, and that was her great appeal. So please continue to do that in memory of her in this work. God bless you, and thank you.